Thank you. All right. While everybody is getting some donuts, before we begin the class, I just want to get a pulse of the class, see how you guys are feeling about Node.js, our favorite Fist of Five. All right. Let's do this. So I see threes, 5, 4. Okay, that's good. Fours. 4, 3, 4s. Anybody? 2 or 1? What did he say? Like 3 and 2? 3. Yeah, 3 and okay. So what about 1 and anybody solid 0? I hope not. Okay. What about 1 or 2? Like a solid 1 or 2? Okay. Again, 3 is pretty natural. Again, it's something a little bit more advanced JavaScript, so it takes time. But did you guys try the zombie challenge? Any chance? Anybody try that? The other than Ethan? All right. So definitely go back and redo those activities. Let me close this out first. Okay, so the thing is that for the next under project 2, we'll be working on Node.js all the way through, right? If you read my Slack message, I said the last week, whatever we studied, that's still like basic Node.js, okay? We still haven't looked at what actually Node.js became popular for, okay? That's for creating servers. That's what Node.js is actually known for, and creating APIs. Okay, we are kind of trending towards that. We still have like 2 more weeks because we need to understand databases before we actually start writing that code. But today we are going to start a little bit more advanced concepts in JavaScript, Node.js. Again, when I talk about anything from here on, I'm going to be solving everything in Node.js, and you guys will be doing the same thing. But again, we understand that the language is still JavaScript, right? So anything that you see in Node.js, 98% of the time, they translate one-to-one in JavaScript in the front end, right? Except the require, and there are a few more keywords. I will point those out. But today's concepts and everything is easily, you can do the same thing in front end JavaScript, okay? So this week, today we are going to look at a little bit more advanced concepts called constructors. If you read my Slack message, it's my least favorite week, and the reason is it's not the concept that I don't like, it's the way that the JavaScript does it. Okay. The thing is that when JavaScript came about, one of the biggest challenges or one of the biggest critiques for JavaScript was it's not organized, especially from back-end programmers who are more fluent in C++ than Java or C Sharp, one of these three languages or more languages, right? When JavaScript was there, there was consensus that, hey, why don't you guys start using JavaScript, right? So most of the critique was, well, it's not organized. It doesn't follow like a design architecture. It's just like Wild West. So JavaScript then in later stages, they wanted to join this cool kids club of these other languages, and they came up with these things, and they were like, hey, now we also have these things. But the thing is, it's not really that they have these things. It's what they did was they just kind of created a wrapper on top of their existing functionality and said, hey, now we have these functionality. The other languages like C++, C Sharp, or Java, their foundation are these concepts that we're going to look at today. Like without even understanding these concepts, you cannot program in those languages. You might be able to write a program, but you will not understand what's going on, right? Because these design patterns are kind of embedded in those languages. JavaScript does not have that, but again, to attract more backend programmers, they have included these stuff in more upcoming or the new versions of JavaScript. But under the hood, basically, they are just simple functions. You can totally do without any of these. And to be honest, in production ready code, I have not seen anything yet, right? That somebody uses it. Actually, I saw one of the homeworks, and actually, it's Chris who used the concept that we are going to look today: classes and constructors. I don't know if anybody else has used. He's the only one who I've seen using these concepts in. It's convenience. That's what I was going to ask him. The biggest thing with these, you use constructors and classes. Okay, okay. So I didn't get a chance to see, but he was showing me something and I saw he was using those concepts. Again, mostly it's convenience, but you can totally do without it. You don't have to know it. Um, so the question is, why am I teaching this? The concepts, as I said, are extremely important. All right. So my hope is once you are, advanced in JavaScript, once you have a job as a web developer, full stack developer, later in your careers, you're going to learn a real programming language such as Java or C Sharp. Just joking, JavaScript is a real language. All right, so you will learn something, and these are the concepts that are borrowed from there. For now, in this class, the only programming language we know is JavaScript. So we cannot actually learn something new to understand these concepts. Since now JavaScript has these, so I'm going to show you how they work in JavaScript, and then later on you can translate the same thing if you learn something different. Okay. All right. Now, the biggest thing is the examples that we will be solving. You will see that these concepts are super beneficial to solve those exercises. Okay. But if you ask me, can you give me a real world example? I don't have any real world example. The thing is, I still haven't seen people using it. And again, as I said, um, in our world, what we say is syntactic sugar. That's what these things are. So you can do without these. So most of the people who are fluent in JavaScript kind of don't use these things. Again, that's not what JavaScript was built for. But again, these things have been included just to appease people who are coming for different languages, and they can now say, hey, we also have these architecture designs. Not really, but you know. So that's why I don't have any real. The most I have seen is React has some of those things, but what I read is in later in the more recent versions, React is also kind of going away from them. But when we get to React, we'll talk more. But that's the most I have seen about it. Again, as I explained, maybe if somebody has seen that code or the TAs have seen that code, they can kind of say that okay, in my company we are kind of using these concepts. But for now, I haven't seen anybody using the production ready code. So I don't really have a real life example. But the examples that we will see, you will notice that they kind of translate very well, and you will not be able to solve those examples unless you know these things. Okay. So it's good to know. Again, when you go into interviews, you are projecting yourself as JavaScript programmers or a full stack with base your programming language is JavaScript. So you need to know because these are included in JavaScript. When I go for interview, JavaScript is my like a secondary language, so I can feign innocence saying, "Hey, I'm not really sure how to do in JavaScript," but in Java, I know all these concepts, so that's why. So for you guys, JavaScript, so it's good to know these concepts. If somebody asks, hey, how do you do this in JavaScript? There is a possibility, so you should be able to answer those. Okay? All right. So before we begin, we'll do a quick refresher exercise, and this includes creating objects. And then once you guys have solved this, we will come back and we will see how to do it um, in a how do we create those objects in a different way. So what this exercise is saying is you're going to start with a blank file, Node.js. This is exercise number 1. You're going to create 2 objects. One is called dogs and one is called cat. 2 objects, right? 2 JavaScript objects. And each of these objects have, let's see, 3 properties. First property looks like it's called raining, and it's a boolean. The second property is noise, and it's a string. The third property is actually a function called make noise. Okay, and then the description says what do you have to do in that function. So similarly, you will create a dogs object, then a cats object, and then call the function that you have created. Okay, so this is just to give a refresher. How do we create objects in JavaScript with properties and functions? See if you can, again, we have done this. It's just a refresher. So try to see if you can recall these concepts, and 15-20 minutes I'll give you to complete this exercise, and then I will solve just to make sure that we are on the same page. Okay, so these are simple JavaScript objects with 3 properties, 1 boolean, 1 string, and 1 function, and then you're calling these properties.
The direction one time.
Mm-hmm. So you're creating two objects. One is called dogs and one is called cats. Each object has three properties. The first is called raining. It's a boolean because you can tell it says a value of true. The second is a string, and the third is a function. And then once you have created these two objects, you're going to call the make noise function outside the object, and it should output something. It should console log something.
Have you heard anything from Jeremy?
No, I have not.
Okay, yeah, because he wasn't here last time and he's not
Yeah.
here today. So
No, I'm not sure.
well, I think you probably references, right? I think it's try taking off the parentheses. Well, because it's right, you're telling it to log this entire thing, right?
So you have two logs. You're console logging a console log.
Yeah.
You're console logging a console log.
Yeah, exactly. And just run it, right? You don't need to log it. Say,
Because you already have a console log inside.
well,
Missing object.
right. So you would do dogs, dog noise. Yeah, I guess.
Oh, I see what you
He's written them outside.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but you're. Yeah. So that should work. Yeah. Yeah, you could do it.
Right. There you go.
I like the long way to get to this.
Right. Yeah.
I'm going to create another function. I'm going to
Well,
create
said
one more.
make the function.
But
Yeah. That's good
remember,
practice.
you're only doing that in a certain instance, right? You're only calling that when a certain condition is met, right? Or is that not part of this one?
It's part of the bonus one.
Oh, it's part of the bonus.
Is it?
I thought that.
Oh yeah, it is.
Both are true.
Yeah.
The noise if it is raining.
If
Yeah.
it is raining, so you're only doing the function if it's raining.
The third key make noise, which contains a
Yeah.
function which console logs the noise to the screen if the raining property is true.
So you're gonna want to only call that function if your condition is true. So I think you want to have your condition inside the function, and then also you would be referencing this you're inside the function. So that's where the this keyword comes back. This. Well, try it again. Are you calling those? So then you would do like. Yeah, you can do dogs. They'd be separate, yeah. So dogs.
All this kind of stuff.
And so right now, if you set one to true, one to false, you expect to see one.
So how's everyone doing on the exercise? Completed? Confused? Not sure. You're what? Done? Oh, the bonus part. Okay. Before the bonus part. You done, Michael?
I'll be able to do the dogs one, but I don't know how to do the raining dogs.
Oh, it's should be exactly the same code. No?
I constructed it exactly the same. So yeah, that's kind
Yeah.
of but if I run it, it says if it's raining.
Yeah, you will have to hard code the true. Like you will at later point you will have to say cats dot raining is equal to true. Remember we can access those properties outside? Yeah, so you'll have to switch it around. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. All right. Let's recap this quickly. Let me go ahead and kind of solve this. Let's see. This is, let's call it cats and dogs. Okay, so I'm going to create my JavaScript file, and then I have to create basically two objects. So the first is going to be dogs. So let dogs is equal to curly braces. All right. Why curly braces? Because that's how you create the object. All right, and then it needs to have three properties. The first one is called raining, and by default it should be true, correct? And then the second property is going to be noise, and by default it is for dogs woof. Okay, and the third property is going to be a function called make noise, and this is going to be a function. Doesn't take any parameters. And what does it do? If it is raining, then console log the noise. Otherwise, don't do anything. So if how do we access the property within the object? Using the this keyword, right? This dot raining. If this is true, then console log this dot noise. Okay. Otherwise, don't do anything. All right. This is how you would create one object. Similarly, for the cats one, is going to be exactly the same. So I'm just going to copy this and change the name to cats, and this becomes new. All right, and nothing else changes. Okay, so far so good. All right, now how do we access these? How do we access them? You can say, so right now this is true. So if I run this, if I want to call this function, I would say dogs dot make noise. Okay, this will go ahead and console log, and then cats dot make noise. Since default they both are true, this condition should fire and should give me some console log. So node cats and dogs, and then that's why I see these. printed out. Okay, if I want to change the value, remember how we can access these properties from outside. Let's say raining is equal to false. Okay, and then if I console log this time, the cat's noise is not printed because the raining is false and this condition kind of fails, so it doesn't console log this. Okay, if you want to add a new property, remember you can just do it over here. Let's say cats dot any new property you can add over. Let's say some property and just say false. This is how you can add new properties. Now this property only belongs to the cat's object but not to the dog's. Okay, this is how you would add a new property if you wanted in objects. All right, the last one was creating a function where it a global function where it outputs everything. So we can create a function mass hysteria. Okay, couple of options you can just output over here as well using the above object. So if dogs dot raining is true and cats dot raining is also true, let me go ahead and console log the message. I'll just copy this message. Okay. When I run this, I should not see this message because my cat's raining is false. So as soon as I go back and change this to, let's change it over here. So I say cats dot raining is equal to true. Okay, now I should see. Oh, still nothing. Oh, because I've defined the function, but I'm not calling the function. So let's go ahead and call this function, and let's comment this out to make sure. Okay, no message because cats.raining is false. Now I should see the message, and there it is. Okay. All right. Any questions? Everybody clear how to create an object? Right now, if I wanted to create a new object, let's suppose a horse object, what do I have to do? I have to do the same thing. I have to copy this or type the whole thing out and then create another object, change this, and this is how I would create an object. Okay, and then I would be using this over here. Okay, so if there were 5 more animal objects that I want to create, I'll have to keep doing the same thing. Okay, so this kind of transitions into the next concept where we can reduce this code and we can create multiple objects using something called a constructor. Okay, it's called a constructor. All right, so the word constructor actually comes from a programming paradigm called object-oriented programming, or OOPS. That's what you will hear most of it. It's called object-oriented. Okay. Now, again, as I said, JavaScript is not really based on this paradigm. That's not the foundation of it is. These things were later on added. Well, this constructor has been there, but some of the coding related to this was added in the newer versions of JavaScript. But C++, Java, C Sharp, their foundation is based on that language. Okay, you cannot that paradigm. You cannot understand to code in those languages unless you understand object-oriented programming. Okay, when I was learning programming 15, 16, 17 years ago in college, they teach that course. This is like a semester-long course. They teach, at that point, they were teaching C++ with object-oriented programming. I think these days they either pick Java or C Sharp. I think the curriculum has changed. Um, but again, you need one of those languages to understand this concept. So in that course, in the 6 month course, you are actually learning the language and also these concepts. But we are learning a whole full stack in 6 months. So I have, I would love to talk about these concepts in detail, but I don't have time, or you guys will not fully grasp those concepts also. So I'm going to touch base accordingly what JavaScript provides us. Okay, but the word constructor is coming from that paradigm, and what the word constructor, what this concept does is it constructs objects. That's what this it does. Okay, so the objects that we have created just now, we can create the same objects using something called constructor. Okay, that's what it does. Now constructor kind of hands in hand go with something called class. It's not part of this right now, but towards the end, if we have time, I will see if I can touch base on this. But again, just understand that this is not the foundation for JavaScript. That's not what JavaScript was for. These things were added later on as a syntactic sugar just to appease people who are coming from. Okay, but these are there now, so it's good that you understand how these things work and what is the use of them. Okay, so we'll look at it from the concept wise. Most probably when you're working, I doubt you will be using constructors in JavaScript. Okay, at least I haven't seen for now. All right, so what did I say? Constructor, we'll the constructor first. Concept wise, it's called a constructor, but if you're looking at the code, you will be like, oh, it's a function, and that's what it is. All right, I'll show you how to, when somebody looks at your code, how to identify that this is actually a constructor, because the definition would be exactly how you would create a function. Okay, all right. From the concept wise, a constructor is another way to create objects or construct objects. Okay, um, so let's go back and maybe I can do it over here. That's fine. So I'm going to solve the same exercise using a constructor. So I'll create a new one saying, let's call it constructor. Okay. All right. So the first thing I said, a constructor when you're coding is just a function. So you're going to create a function. All right. We're going to give it a name and some parameters. Right. Now, a constructor's job is to create objects, and you have to give a name of a constructor that's more generic, right? So for example, in our previous example, our objects are cats, dogs, horses. So a generic term for those would be animals, if that's what you think, right? So the name, always when you're creating a constructor, look at your objects that you're going to be creating from that constructor and then come up with a name that is more generic, because our animal constructor would be able to create any animal objects. That's what it translates to in English language. Okay, so for example, I'm going to be creating some animal objects. So I'm going to call a constructor, a function called animal. Now, if you notice, I'm kind of going away from the standard practice. Usually, when you're creating a function, the standard is using camel casing, right? Animal. This is how it should have been. But a constructor is a special function. Again, this is just standard. Just to identify, because just looking at this function, you cannot tell if this is a constructor function or not, right? So by standard, what we have come up with is, if it is an uppercase, if you're creating a constructor, use this standard, that your first letter should be uppercase. This, anybody who's looking at your code will automatically understand that what you're trying to say is that this is going to act as a constructor. Okay, from the coding perspective, there's no differentiation between creating a function and a constructor. You cannot tell whether this is a constructor or whether this is a function. Okay, so again, so by standard, what we do is we follow this naming convention. We make it uppercase, the first letter, instead of using camel casing, and that's how we identify, okay, my intention is that I'm creating a constructor. All right, everybody clear on the standards? Yes.
You still use like a capital for the second word. What is like farm animals? Capital
Yes,
F,
yes.
capital F.
And after that, so if it's a farm animals, it would be farm animals. Okay, good question. All right, so let's go ahead and create and now, so we had our three properties. So we're going to translate all of these properties into this constructor. So we're going to say this dot raining is equal to, let's set it to true. Okay, this dot noise, let's set it to empty string. Okay, and then our condition, our function was this dot make noise, which is a function, don't take any parameters, which console logs this dot noise. Okay, so I created a function, a constructor function, and this constructor is going to create objects, and these objects are going to have these three properties, right? Any property that your object is going to have, you will have to define it using the this keyword and then the property name, exactly how you define an object. Okay, now how do we create an object from using this constructor function? So outside the constructor, you're going to say let dogs is equal to, and this is important, the keyword is called new. The new key will go ahead and create a dogs object. Okay, does it have the properties? You will get these properties, the values are not there, so you will have to set those values later on. Again, we'll see how do we do that. For example, if I do cat, so I will have to do cats is equal to new animal. Okay, so this is going to create a cats object. I don't have to keep copying pasting. If I want the hearts one, I will do hearts is equal to new animal. Okay, and then if you want to call these function, you would just say dogs dot. You will see this helps make noise, and then you can say cats dot make noise, and you can also do same with horse. Oops. It's sort of the same. Okay. All right. Any questions so far before I tell how to set these values now? Good. Okay. Now, for dogs, let's suppose I want to set the noise. The first way is you can do it over here, saying dogs dot noise is equal to oof. Okay, that's one way. You could do cats dot noise is equal to new, and then cats, oops, horses dot oops. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this to see if this is working fine, and then we'll see if we can change this a bit. So this is raining is true, so I should see all of these coming back. So nodes, and then you see this output over here. Okay, So one more time, if you're creating a constructor, it's just another function. By standards, we follow this naming convention. The first letter should be uppercase, okay, and then you add some properties to it. The properties that you're adding has to be using the keyword this, okay, and then if you want to create an object using the animal constructor, you're going to use the keyword new. Okay, if you don't use the keyword new, it's going to act differently. It's not going to work the same way. Okay, and this is how you can create objects using the constructor function. Okay, if you want to add or upgrade the values to these properties, you are doing it either you can do it outside, or the other way is you can pass these as parameters to your constructor. Okay, for example, what I mean by this is you can pass parameters and you can say raining noise, okay, and then set these values to whatever the parameters that are coming in. So let's suppose if I do this, these are corresponding to these, okay, this one is over here, and this is the property that you're creating. Okay, so now is this valid anymore? It's not. Why? Because my constructor is expecting two parameters now, so I need to pass in two arguments over here. Okay, so when I'm creating the dogs, so I'm going to say it is raining, so I'm going to say true, and then the second parameter expects a string, so I'm going to pass this in. Okay, similarly when I'm creating the cats object, let's suppose I'm going to say false, it's not raining, and then I'm going to pass in this thing. Okay, for horse, let's say it's raining, and then pass in the noise. Okay, so in this case you don't then have to do this. All right, so let's go ahead and run this. You will see this time you will see the dog and the why is it the cat's one? Make noise. Oh, I don't have the condition. Let's add that condition. If this dot raining, then show the noise. Okay, so there's no cat one because I am passing the value false. Okay, this is, you will see when you're creating constructor, this is more more conventional, that you pass in few things that you know that are going to be used in your constructor, so that when you're creating the dogs, whenever you're creating an object, you don't have to set those values later on. But later on, these values might change, so that's why you can do it. But this is how you can create an object using a constructor with some parameters. This is not uncommon. You will see this a little bit more common versus creating a no parameter constructor. Okay, questions? Yes.
So the function make noise automatically is passed on no matter what, because it's inside the constructor.
Yes. It's not being passed. It's present over here. You're calling this function. So all of these properties are present inside the function, inside the constructor, and then you can access the other properties as well. So for example, the raining property, if I say cats dot raining is equal to true, where is this property? Which one is this? This is this one, this dot raining. This is what it is trying to access. Okay, it's not trying to access this one, it's trying to access anything with this one. Okay? Now, if you want to add a new property, all you have to do is say cats dot, let's say there's a property, let's say, okay, let's suppose this property is only valid for my cats object and nobody else doesn't even know what this means. Okay, so if I do this, I say cats object, right, and then add a new property. Does this property exist? It does not exist over here. Okay, So this new property is only going to be part of the cats object. Okay. Now, and you can test this out if you say, if you console log, let's console log the cats object. Let's see if this shows up. Okay, so this property is now part of the cats object. If you console log dogs or horses, you will see that this property is not part of those two objects. Okay, so if you try to access this property with dogs or horses, it's going to give you an error. Again, why? Because this syntax, you are only attaching this property to this object. Okay, so you cannot do that. Now, there might be cases where you want to create a property which should be assigned to all of them. The other way to do this is, and it's a little bit confusing, what you have to do is, if you want to attach a property to all of your objects, okay, so you have to call the constructor animal dot prototype. This is a keyword, and then the property name.
You can just change it to the top.
You can change it at the top, but let's suppose you are not able to change it on the top. Later on, you want to add this code. This is how you would add it. Okay, if you use this syntax, the constructor name dot prototype and the property name, this property is now associated with dogs, cats, horses, and every other object that is created using this constructor. Okay, this is the key point. Prototype. At some point later on, we will kind of come back to it. It's a very interesting topic, but it's still a little bit more advanced. Once you guys are more comfortable with JavaScript, we'll come back and talk about this at some point. But this is how you would add a property to every object. Yes.
Apparently the live stream is offline.
It's offline. Let's see. That shows me live. All right, I'll come back and I'll check that again. But I see it's live. I'll check back. But any questions on this? We'll do an exercise and then I can check at that point. No questions? Everybody understand constructors in first point? Ready? Good? All right. So let's do the next exercise. This is going to be using constructors, but it's a little bit bigger exercise. So let's take a look at that. This is exercise number 3. So this is, we have done this before project 1. Sure what part was. You're going to create the same RPG game. Remember there was a character name, profession, gender, age, and then you make those characters fight. So you're going to kind of create the same thing, but this time you're going to use constructors and you're going to create those character objects using the constructor. Instead of each individual objects, you're going to create a constructor, and then you're going to use that constructor to create each character. Okay, so since this is going to be, the objects are going to be different characters, right? If I was you, I would create a constructor called character, like uppercase first, uppercase, okay, and then my objects would be created from that constructor. This is how I would name it, but if you come up with a better name, please use that. But make sure it is generic enough that it conveys the intention that what your objects are going to look like. Okay, again, this is more like a standard. Let's suppose a character constructor tells me that you're going to be creating some kind of characters from this one. Okay, let's suppose you have an object called car, just some random object. You can still use this use the syntax and this will still work. But the thing is, from the intention perspective, that's not right. Like I'm creating a car object, but the constructor I'm using is a character. It kind of don't really, it's confusing. It doesn't really tell what I'm trying to do. So that's what I was saying, that every time you're creating objects, make sure you have a good generic name, that all objects make sense when they're associated with that constructor. For example, in this one, you're creating characters, so character would be a better name for it. Okay, so character constructor looks like it has 7 properties. 6 of them are properties, and the last one is a function. So 6 properties and 1 function. Okay. The first 3 look to be a string properties. The fourth is an integer. Fifth is also an integer, which is a number, or um, and then the last property, hit points, is also a number. Okay. Integer just says that it will not have like a decimal point. That's what the intention over here is. It's going to be a whole number. And then the last one would be a function, which is going to basically console log all the properties. Once you have that constructor definition done, then you're going to create 2 new characters, print the properties to the screen. And then you're going to add some more functionality to this. Okay, looks like a pretty big exercise. Will take, I want to give you guys enough time to complete this, because otherwise the next one is even more difficult, so it wouldn't even help you guys. So let's go ahead and let's see. Let's start with 30 minutes. Let's see, by 11:30, see if how far you guys get along. Okay. Again, create a constructor. Either you can pass in those values or you can do it the way I did. Both of those are fine. Josh, who's streaming? Who? Okay, let me check. Both are not able to see. Okay, and Mian, right? Let me check with her.